So, Star, I would love to hear what you have to say about the interconnection between permaculture and paganism, because Tikkun Daily really is attempting to become a voice of the, as opposed to the religious right, the religious left, but really that connection between religion and politics, spirituality and politics, and in this case between spirituality, paganism, and permaculture is something that we're very interested in. So I'd love to hear what you had to say about that. And today you were talking about the what you see as 5 principles and connecting them with paganism, and that might be a good way to talk about this.
Okay, well, for me, I got into the permaculture movement. I really came to it out of paganism, out of the goddess movement, because for many years I had been practicing a spirituality and a religion that basically says the earth is sacred. The earth is a living being. We're part of this larger being that is an organism that is the cycles of birth and growth and death and regeneration that take place throughout all of nature and also through human beings and human culture. And sometime in the late 80s, I guess, I met a friend who'd taken a permaculture course, and she started talking to me about this whole system of ecological design that was about really using nature as a model and creating systems that can meet our human needs in ways that actually regenerate the environment around us instead of destroying it. And I went, whoa, this sounds like the practical application of the spiritual ideas and the spiritual practice that I've had. So I began reading about it, learning about it, and in 1996 I was finally able to take a permaculture design course. There's a set of, kind of 72-hour curriculum that's kind of established throughout the world that gives you the kind of basic introduction to permaculture. Permaculture began in the 1970s when 2 Australians, Bill Mollison and David Holmgren, were running around the Tasmanian rainforests and asking questions like, how come nobody needs to go out and prune the rainforest? Nobody needs to fertilize it. No one needs to spray it for bugs. It takes care of itself. Why couldn't we grow food for humans in the same way the rainforest takes care of itself? And out of that, they developed a set of ethics and a set of principles. The ethics are very simple. Care for the earth, care for people, and care for the future by sharing the surplus, by returning what you have back to the land, by limiting consumption. And those ethics guide the way you implement the principles and the way that you design systems. The principles, there are many principles. I talked about a few this afternoon. To me, they all go back, the sort of overarching principle is about looking at systems and looking at relationships rather than separate, isolated objects. And I feel like that is the core of the shift that also, again, is at the heart of my spirituality. Indigenous spirituality, Native Americans will say, Ho Mitakoyasin, and they'll say, all my relations, In the goddess tradition, we're looking again at the world as a set of relationships and ourselves as part of those relationships, not as a bunch of stuff that we're licensed to exploit, but we understand that our relationship with the natural world around us is what sustains our life. Right. And the relationships within that are what sustain the biodiversity, the richness, the abundance, the beauty of the planet. So in permaculture, for example, we look at the relationships of where things are in relation to one another. You know, if you design your systems so that you put things in the right relative location, that saves a lot of energy. It saves a lot of need for stuff. It saves a lot of human energy. So, you know, if you catch water in your landscape high up, then it can gravity feed down. You don't need a pump to pump it up. If you place the things in, if you put your garden somewhere close to your house, where, you know, maybe every time you step out your door and go out to the street, you have to walk through your garden, you are going to tend that garden much better than if you put it way out at the back of your lot,
right.
You know, right? If you put the things that need the most tending closest to the house and along those paths where you see them, they're going to get that tending. Or we often say, you know, you put your wood pile between your house and your outhouse, and then every time you go out to the outhouse, you bring in a few sticks of wood. You never have to burden yourself with the task of getting wood. There are many principles like that. You think about when things happen in relation to each other, that you have to prepare the ground before you plant the garden. You take root, to me, is one of the key principles, that you root yourself in a place, you get to know it, you learn it, you feel commitment to a community. And that's a principle that applies not just to your garden, but I think it's also an economic principle that we desperately need right now as a counter to climate change and as a counter to the oppressive aspects of globalization, that we need businesses to root in communities and be responsible to communities, not just responsible to extracting value from a community so they can make some sort of abstract profit for shareholders who are somewhere else, but they need to be responsible for actually serving some real needs in ways that actually give the people who work there some kind of a decent life.
Right.
Another principle is around catching and storing energy, that the sun showers us with energy every day. You know, if we can capture that in different ways, store it and reuse it, that energy gives us abundance. We can capture it in something like solar panels, but we can also capture it in something like plants that grow, that we eat. You know, there's a principle in economics, too, that it's not how many dollars come into a community that generate wealth and abundance. It's how many times each dollar recirculates before it leaves. Another principle that I think of a lot is that in nature there's no waste. You know, one thing dies and it feeds another thing. One thing's excretions, you know, become another thing's resource. And when we put that principle into effect, you know, if we look at the things, there's also kind of a little corollary that pollution is an unused resource. So if we look at anything even as basic as sewage, let's say, you know, which is a tremendous pollutant on the planet right now, but is actually a great source of nutrients. And, you know, millions of children around the world die every year from contaminated water, from diarrhea, from diseases that are entirely preventable. Because there's actually, it's not difficult to deal with human sewage as long as you don't need to put it in water and flush it away. Right? I always tell my students there's nothing easier to build than a composting toilet that can handle this safely, you know, and turn that pollutant, turn that lethal stuff into an actual resource that can help grow your trees, you know, or revitalize your soil. So when we start to learn these things, then there's like a cycle of destruction that we can actually turn around and turn it into a cycle of regeneration and resilience.